In this chapter, we're going to learn how to actually render some live data. At the moment, all we're doing in our dashboard component is actually referencing a static array. However, in your applications, this isn't the way that you're going to be doing things. So you may have looked by now, and we have this db.json file here, which in the next few videos, we're going to put our passenger array, and this actually acts as a local JSON server. So it basically gives us a live API to work against. So the first thing that we need to do is create our service. Now, we talked about services in the architectural overview at the beginning of this course. So we're going to go ahead and create our own service. Now, what we're going to do is put it next to the dashboard module. So what we can do is simply create a new file here. So what we're going to do is passenger and then dashboard.service.ts. So inside of here, all we're going to do is export and a class, and we're going to call this the passenger dashboard service. So you may realize by now that everything in Angular is a class. Now we're going to create a constructor as well. So underneath here, what we're going to do is create a function called getPassengers. Now this is where we're going to create our first static piece of data. And then in the next few videos, we're going to hook it up to our live server. So the first thing that we need to do is actually save this out quickly. We'll copy this name and we'll head across to our dashboard module. Now we need to register this module inside our service. So we can just leave a comment here. And what we're going to do is import our dashboard service and then from, and because it's in the root directory, we can do // and then you can see that TypeScript has then found that reference to our passenger service. Now, this is a new piece of information that we need to know about an ng module. At the moment, we've been dealing with components, and we've also been dealing with importing other modules, and we've also exported a dashboard component. Now, in Angular, a service is something that we call a provider. So if you go onto your ng module and start typing providers, you can see that this pops up. And again, this is just going to be an array. So we're going to paste this value in again, and we have our passenger dashboard service that we've imported from the file that we've just created. So this essentially tells our ng module that we have these components, and one of these components may rely on this service. So what we're going to do is basically make this service available to any of the components. And this is done through something called dependency injection. So now you've done this, what you can do is close off the module. Now what we're going to do for this video is something rather simple. We're just going to import the data and return it from this getPassenger call. So if you go into your container component, we can open up this. You can scroll down into your component class and you can grab the this.passengers array. So I'm just going to highlight everything here and we'll go down to the bottom. Now I'm going to copy this and simply delete it. Now don't save this at the moment, because it will then throw an error. So we'll get back in here, and what we'll do is just write a return statement. So we're going to return this array after we've just pasted it in. So you can see that we're creating now a data layer for our application. So we have this passenger dashboard service, and it's going to have a method on it called getPassengers. When we call that method, it's going to return all of our passengers. So you can see all of our passengers live inside of here. So we can save this file. Now what we want to do is go back into our component. This is where things get interesting. So what we're going to look at is something called dependency injection. Now you may have looked at something called dependency injection and used a constructor function in perhaps ES6 beforehand, and you may have done something like foo, and then inside of the constructor you might have done this.foo equals foo. So you essentially take this reference and then bind it to a local foo property. Now in TypeScript, we can do a similar thing. However, we can automate it. So what we want to do is use a word called private. So this will essentially allow us to inject the dependency into here and tell TypeScript that it's a private method. So we shouldn't be calling it publicly. And we're going to give this an alias of passenger and then capital S service. Now the interesting piece is how Angular looks up tokens. So we need to tell Angular what this passenger service is going to be. Now we've exported a member called the dashboard passenger service. So what we actually need to do is import it into this component and then register it in the actual constructor. So what we'll do is import the passenger dashboard service, and we actually have to go back a few levels when we import this. So we'll do .. // and then TypeScript will then give us a couple of options and we can choose the service. So you can have .. passenger dashboard service. So TypeScript has now found this. So now we have a reference to our service in this particular component. We can scroll down to our constructor, and this is the interesting part, is we can just paste it in here. Now what Angular will do is use this token to essentially bind it automatically for you to an internal property called passenger service. Now this might sound complicated, but essentially all it's doing is this .passenger service equals the passenger dashboard service. So this is kind of doing a local wiring up for you. So when we go back to our ng on init, we can actually replace all of that data that we used at the beginning with this static array. So what we can do is this .passenger service, and then we can just call get passengers. So this will actually return us an array of our passengers. One thing that's also going to be handy here is importing our TypeScript model for our interface. So let's go back to our dashboard service, and we're going to tell TypeScript that this function is going to return a passenger array. Now we don't actually have this locally, so we'll go up here and import this. So we'll do import and we'll paste the passenger in, and we'll do from, and then .models / passenger interface. So now we're using TypeScript properly. We're importing our passenger interface. We've created a get method. We're simply saying it returns an array of passengers. And obviously, if I change one of these to a string, it's going to go red. So TypeScript again is helping here to make sure that our data sets are correct. Now, before we go back to the browser, you need to make sure that you have saved this out. Now, this is what we call a synchronous call. So this is synchronously being bound to this .passengers. So this video is purely demonstrating how to create a service. So let's go to the browser and check this out. So in the browser, you should see the exact same things that we had before. We can remove an item, we can edit an item, press save, and we're all done. So our data is now completely out of the component, and we've created our first data service. We've also injected a service like we talked about right at the beginning of this course in the architectural video, where we bind a particular service to a component. So this video has actually demonstrated that we've done that. In the next few videos, we're actually going to hook up to our live API and start using the Angular HTTP module.